Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into a really fascinating synthesis of two completely different, yet incredibly profound systems. On one hand, we have ancient Vedic marriage astrology, and on the other, the modern clinical psychology of displaced anger. Our main goal today? Figuring out the unseen forces that actually shape our relationship dynamics. So whether you lean more toward the celestial side of things or the psychological, I promise you there is something deeply revealing waiting for you in this analysis. Let's get into it. I mean, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? Why do some relationships just effortlessly thrive while others hit these sudden, inexplicable walls of conflict? You totally know the kind I'm talking about, where everything looks perfectly fine on paper, but the day-to-day reality is just constant friction. Well, today we are going to unpack this exact phenomenon. We're going to look at how unseen forces, whether we're talking about celestial planetary alignments or subconscious behavioral loops, can completely dictate your relationship compatibility and trigger those baffling arguments out of nowhere. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the blueprint of marriage, move into planetary influences on spouses, and then look at timing and true compatibility. After that, we'll tackle astrological marital friction, shift gears into the displaced anger phenomenon, and wrap it all up with healing and moving forward. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the blueprint of marriage. Okay, so Vedic astrology looks way, way beyond your standard daily newspaper horoscope. Before we even start looking at the houses in an astrological chart, we have to look at what are known as karakas. In Vedic astrology, karakas are essentially the significator planets that fundamentally represent marriage. For men, that planet is Venus. For women, it's Jupiter. The really crucial takeaway here is that a strong, exalted Venus or Jupiter can literally save a marriage, even if all the other planetary placements are incredibly difficult. The source text actually notes an example of a woman with a super tough chart who still gets deep respect and care from her husband simply because she has an exalted Jupiter. It's a real game changer. And this brings us to a huge contrast that perfectly highlights the difference between what the rest of the world sees and what actually goes down behind closed doors. In Vedic astrology, the seventh house is the famous one, right? It represents your partner, the overall quality of the marriage, even the physical traits of your spouse. It's the public face of your union. But the eighth house? That represents the hidden challenges. We're talking in-laws, joint finances, deeply guarded intimacy, and those psychological adjustments that no one ever talks about openly. If that eighth house is afflicted, you are looking at a lot of hidden, under-the-surface stress. Moving right along to Section 2, planetary influences on spouses. So let's look at how specific planets actually dictate the emotional and practical realities of living with a partner. Venus brings love, attraction, and that essential physical bonding. Jupiter brings wisdom, support, and a really strong family orientation. Mars gives incredible passion and physical chemistry. But, and you gotta watch out for this one, it also brings fights and major control issues. Saturn is basically the ultimate taskmaster. It causes delays and tests you. But it'll reward you with long-term stability if you put in the hard work. And K2 brings detachment, karmic problems, or just this heavy sense of emotional withdrawal. Now, logic would probably tell you that having the planet of marriage sitting right inside the seventh house of marriage would be the ultimate jackpot, right? Well, actually, scratch that. There is this fascinating rule called Karaka Bhava Nashe. This rule states that a planet placed in the house it signifies can actually harm its results. So having Venus or Jupiter sitting in the seventh house can create immense problems. Even if they are totally exalted, they might still lead to emotional suffering. In fact, the source notes this often leads to disrespect or neglect, particularly in women's charts. It just goes to show how wildly complex and nuanced the rules of this ancient system really are. Okay, on to Section 3, timing and true compatibility. To understand true compatibility, we have to demystify the Navamsha chart, which is also known as the D9 chart. Think of your main birth chart as the promise of a marriage, but the Navamsha chart as the actual lived reality. A marriage might look absolutely fantastic on the main birth chart, but then turn incredibly bitter in reality if the D9 chart is afflicted. It essentially shows how the relationship is actually going to feel long after the wedding bells stop ringing. And honestly, none of this matters without the right timing. You could have the greatest astrological compatibility in the universe, but marriage is not going to happen without the correct timing triggers. First off, you need the right dasha period, meaning you're running the major or minor time cycles of a marriage planet like Venus, Jupiter, or your seventh house lord. Second, you need planetary transits, like Saturn or Jupiter literally crossing over the seventh house up in the sky. When those things align, bam, the door opens to the marriage event. Which brings us to Section 4, Astrological Marital Friction. So, how does it all go wrong? Vedic astrology outlines a very specific pathway to marital breakdown. Step 1. The Lord of the seventh house is placed in a difficult house, namely the 6th, 8th, or 12th. For example, if it's sitting way out in the 12th house, it can cause deep emotional distance or even secret affairs. Step 2. Malefic planets, troublemakers like Saturn, Mars, or Ketu, afflict these houses. And step 3 is the inevitable result. The couple experiences daily conflicts, totally cold emotional detachment, or ultimately legal separation.
And you literally cannot talk about astrological friction without bringing up Manglik dosha. This happens when Mars is in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 7th, 8th, or 12th house. It is famous, well, infamous really, for causing huge ego clashes, intense arguments, and serious control issues. But, and this is absolutely crucial, it is not always a negative thing. Depending on the exact planetary placement, it can actually be a massively positive force, giving incredible mental strength and success. The source actually highlights the charts of celebrity couple Virat Kohli and Anushka Sharma, where their Mars placements provided the drive and willpower for immense career success and mutual understanding. Pretty cool, right?
All right, let's switch gears entirely. Section 5, the displaced anger phenomenon. Listen to this incredibly jarring scenario provided by Mission Connection. Quote, you open the door and bam, seething anger that you can't control. As soon as you see them, you let everything out, and they're left wondering, what on earth just happened? This vividly introduces how perfectly normal relationships can suddenly feel like an absolute battlefield, completely devoid of any mystical or astrological explanation whatsoever. What you just heard is the textbook definition of displaced anger. This is a psychological phenomenon where a person redirects strong emotions towards a safer target rather than the actual source of their frustration. It's a subconscious coping mechanism. For instance, blowing up at your spouse the second you walk through the door just because the house is slightly messy, that is very often just redirected anger from dealing with an intimidating boss at work that you couldn't safely yell back at.
Uncovering the roots of this is wild. Displaced anger stems from deeply suppressed emotions. It's very often rooted in unresolved childhood trauma, developing in unsafe childhood homes where expressing anger to a parent was literally dangerous. And since anger doesn't just magically disappear, it gets bottled up. So when does it finally erupt? Years later in life, when the person finally feels they're in a safe space, like a committed marriage or even a therapy room. This mirrors so perfectly the sudden hidden conflicts we just discussed in the astrological 8th and 12th houses. It's the baggage we carry behind closed doors.
Finally, Section 6, healing and moving forward. So whether you're looking up at the stars for solutions or sitting on a therapist's couch, the good news is both systems offer really tangible pathways to overcoming deep-seated relationship trauma. Vedic astrology advises analyzing that Navamsha chart to understand the true emotional reality, matching compatibility way beyond basic scores, and being patient for favorable dasha timings. Psychology, on the flip side, directs us to engage in talk therapy, actively practice emotional awareness, and build healthy coping skills so we can recognize and stop displacing our anger onto the people we love the most. Which leaves us with one final, really profound question to ponder. How much of your own relationship dynamic is written in the stars, and how much is deeply wired into your psychology? Maybe the answer isn't just one or the other, but a fascinating blend of both. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive in the Explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.